Hello and welcome to the Legal Genie Podcast with me, Lara Quie. Why am I the Legal Genie? Because I bring out the magic in you and help you make your wishes come true. I practiced as a corporate lawyer in London for a number of years before leaving the law to become an entrepreneur and co-founder of a successful designer kitchen business. Upon selling the business 10 years ago and moving to Asia, I moved back into law, but not as a lawyer. Most recently, I was the Asia Pacific Head of Business Development for a leading international law firm. Due to an unexpected life event in 2020, I discovered the power of executive coaching and recently launched Lara Quie Associates, a boutique consultancy which enables me to work with fun and inspiring people across the globe. This podcast explores the fascinating world of the legal ecosystem and the people within it. From rainmakers at global elite firms to trainees just starting to get their feet wet. From Queen's Counsel, barristers, in-house counsel and the judiciary to legal tech innovators, pricing specialists, HR managers, business development and marketing professionals, legal headhunters and everyone else who is a mover and shaker in this space. My goal is to help you see your world differently. What insights can you gain from hearing others share their experiences? What action can you take as a result? I hope that you will be inspired and learn a lot from this episode. Please enjoy the conversation. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Legal Genie Podcast, where I interview movers and shakers in the legal industry. I'm excited to have with me today John van der Luit-Drummond. Many of you will be familiar with his name due to his former role as the editor of the Legal 500's UK Bar and Asia Pacific directories, and the editor of its magazine called 500. This month, he's taken on an exciting new role as the editor-in-chief of Portobello Legal Media. John read law at the University of Kent and went on to do the LPC at the University of Law in London. After working in both city and regional law firms, John embarked on a career as a legal journalist and reporter, writing extensively on personal injury, criminal justice reform, human rights and intellectual property issues. He spent time at World Trademark Review and then the Solicitor's Journal, where he became the deputy editor before joining the Legal 500 in 2017. In 2016, he was shortlisted for the Halsbury Legal Journalism Award, and his work has appeared in publications including GC Magazine, New Law Journal, Managing Partner, Young Lawyer, and Private Client Advisor.
John, a very big welcome to you for the Legal Genie podcast. It's been a while since I saw you. As I mentioned, we met here in Singapore in 2017.
We did, which was my first trip as editor for the Asia Pacific Guide.
That's right. I was very hot off the mark to notice that you were newly joining and that you were going to come over, and I set up a nice dinner for you to come over and meet all our lawyers.
It was a very lovely dinner. I remember it well. It was a great trip to Singapore, my first time visiting Asia, and it definitely left a mark on me. I met some lovely contacts and learned a lot about the market in my first few weeks on the job. So that was great.
Yeah, no, it was a very exciting time. And obviously there's been a lot of changes in the world since then. But yes, but we won't go into that right now. We will start with a bit about your background. So tell us a bit about, where you grew up and, what your childhood was like.
So I grew up in Kent, southeast London. And from a early age, I actually wanted to be a lawyer. The rationale behind it was my parents were going through a rather difficult divorce separation. And I remember that my mother had always felt, or at least appeared to me as a kid, to be much better after she'd gone to see her lawyer. So there was probably some kind of childlike thing of, I can make my mum happy by becoming a lawyer and helping her out whenever she needs legal advice in the future. So that was kind of planted the seed as to what I wanted to do with myself. And obviously between then and university, some things changed. There were times I wanted to be a pilot or an artist or a journalist or something else. But in the end, when I was leaving school, I wanted to go and do law. probably because I watched too many legal dramas as well. I think things like Boston Legal, Judge John Deed probably were not fair representations of what the legal profession actually is. And for those who watch that and just think that's what life's going to be like, they've got a rude awakening coming from when they actually do end up in practice. But I went to Kent, had an amazing 3 years there, learned an awful lot, as you should do when you're at university studying law. Then I took a year out before doing the LPC, tried a few other things, nothing particularly exciting, unfortunately. But went back, finished the LPC, and then that was about 2008. And we all know that in 2008, there was this minor thing called the financial crisis. And obviously a lot of law firms started to retrench and not take on as many trainees anymore. So it was, the paralegal trenches for me for the next couple of years, and obviously the number of qualified graduates increased and the number of training contracts stayed the same or got less over those few years. So it was a lot of, jobbing around trying to find a firm that would give you a paralegal role and then, try to worm your way up and make yourself useful, and hopefully they'll keep you on as a trainee. And that didn't always work. So, you moved around a few firms. And after a few years of that, it kind of got to the stage where I just wasn't really enjoying it anymore. And you can't necessarily see the end goal coming for you. Plus, you kind of get a sense as well as to what might make you happy and what doesn't. So, what does somebody do with a few £1,000s worth of student debt and a law degree? I thought, well, if I can't practice law, maybe I could write about it instead. So I launched my own blog, writing about parts of law that I found interesting. Got a entry-level role at a publishing house. And in a few months, I was lucky enough to be taken on as a trainee reporter. And I was there for just under a year, working on intellectual asset management and World Trademark Review magazines, and also dipping in a bit with lawcareers.net. And then Solicitors Journal came along and gave me probably my big break. And I moved over there. Solicitors Journal, for those who don't know, it's the oldest legal magazine in the market. 1850s it was launched, and it was a great time. I met some amazing people in the team over there, people who are now lifelong friends, and who taught me a lot, gave me a lot of mentoring and confidence to succeed in the role. Unfortunately, about 3.5 years into that, Solicitors Journal needed to close, and I had to find something new. And that's when the Legal 500 came along. And as you said, up until recently, I was there doing 3 gigs. So that's the whistle-stop tour of me going from baby wannabe lawyer to legal editor.
It's a very interesting journey, and it shows how you reinvented yourself, and you obviously liked the subject of law, and you obviously have talent for writing, and were able to become a journalist and then see that side and write about it. But also having, as you said, been in the trenches as a paralegal, you'd had an insight into various law firms from the inside. And I think that's always an essential part, of the legal directories, really, knowing some flavour of each of the different cultures, because firms are actually very different, aren't they? And so knowing about those kind of insights will have stood you in very good stead when you joined the Legal 500. So I'm sure for everybody listening, Legal 500 is the juicy bit for us in terms of, what really goes on behind the scenes. And we can imagine lots of very irate partners being astounded that they haven't appeared, as an outstanding leader in their field. What can you tell us about some really interesting stories from your time there?
Interesting stories. I mean, every year, as editors, we are in the firing line when the guide comes out, because yes, you're right, that there are a number of partners, and I'm sure any BDs working will know them in their own firms, who will get straight on the phone to the editor or the researcher, unfortunately, or an email, and send their thoughts on what's wrong with us and why we've done anything wrong. And sometimes it's actually quite innocent in that they have a misunderstanding of how the process works and what we're looking for, or in fact, perhaps in the fact they haven't even bothered to put in a submission that year. And if we don't have a submission, we can't look at what work you're doing, and we're evidence-based, and therefore, you're not going to get ranked. Other times, it can be a bit more difficult. I think I've written about this before. There's a lot of abuse sometimes that goes on directed toward the directories and individuals, whether that's a kind of a bullying attitude or even, sexual harassment even towards some of our female staff from partners who really should know better. And we took quite a strong line on this and said, look, any form of abuse headed our way, we're not going to take it. Other than the fact it's wrong to do it to us, how can we possibly know that you're not doing this to people in your own firm, or even, dare I say it, to your own clients in some respects, the more junior clients you have in-house. So, we can't be seen to recommend, a firm or individual who acts in that way. So that's kind of the darker side sometimes of the directory, so to bring things down. But it's something that I do try to talk to a lot of firms about and say, look, the people on the other end of the directory, they are human. Yes, occasionally, of course, a mistake can be made, whether it's a typo or, maybe something's been missed in a submission, and that can be rectified and a ranking can be reassessed. But the idea of sending someone, the equivalent of a letter in green ink that's 20 or 30 paragraphs long, telling us how we need to rethink our lives, is probably the wrong way to go about it. You certainly don't endear yourself to the editor or dare I say it, the researcher, and you're supposed to be trying to impress us with what you're doing, dare I say it, and that kind of reaction to a ranking is not going to hold you in good stead, unfortunately. But some of the funnier ones is when you just get somebody saying, how can you possibly not rank me? I'm the biggest cheese, doing aviation leasing or oil and gas transaction or something in a particular jurisdiction. And full well that you've spoken to all the other partners around the area and they've got nothing but bad things to say about that individual, or indeed they haven't even bothered putting in a submission and they're expecting you to somehow read between the lines and know that this person is who they are. Those moments are you kind of have to laugh or you'll cry sometimes, or you'll bang your head off a desk, to be honest. On the other hand, that there are times that can really make you smile, and that's when you get an email or a call from a lawyer who says, just honestly, thank you for ranking me, because I can already see, since they ranked me last year, my practice has increased exponentially, doing so much more interesting work now. And that's because you recognize what I was doing before. And that kind of makes it all worthwhile, that, you are having an impact. And obviously, the primary goal of the guide is for the user, the in-house counsel, the members of the public who need to instruct somebody. But if, as a byproduct of that, somebody's practice can actually increase as well, and they can do more interesting and better work, then that's great as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I always felt that, the directories really come into their own when it's to do with jurisdictions that you're not familiar with in particular, because you've basically done the due diligence. So if I might need a firm in Cambodia or something, that's really when I'll reach for it and literally go through and think, top tier, I wonder, they're probably really expensive, shall I be sort of second or third tier is sort of sounds a bit more likely. But it was a very interesting experience, having done many directory submissions myself late at night, the bane of my life in business development for sure. And
I think something that I would like to give a shout out to all the BDs and marketing people who work all year long on this. Obviously, there are some firms that have just specific teams of people doing directories, and I'd like to probably speak to everybody at Legal 500 who's still obviously accepting the submissions from you. Thank you so much for the hard work you do. I think you are the unsung heroes of the submission process. I'm sure you get a lot of stick from partners, wanting things done a certain way or not listening to you when you probably know how best to do it. But certainly, the Legal 500, and I'm sure the other directories as well, they appreciate all the work you put into it, and often how you are occasionally the good cop to the partner's bad cop when things don't go the firm's way. We know that you're sometimes stuck in the middle, having to stop a partner getting on the phone and sending us some invective. So as I say, the BDs, you've got my eternal respect for some of the stuff you have to go through when it comes to submissions.
Yes, it's definitely a tough time. But in terms of, lawyers listening right now who are thinking about submissions and putting their best foot forward, I always used to say that a lot of the weight is given to obviously what the client's feedback in terms of their experience and reaching them, etc. But it's quite hard for the directories to reach them and get the feedback, isn't it? So what do you recommend that partners do in order to make sure that the feedback actually reaches Legal 500?
Well, the first thing I would say is to provide us with Legal 500 with as many clients as you possibly can. Obviously, the more emails we're sending out to clients, the more likely is that one of them is going to respond. And you don't have to limit it, obviously, to just one particular individual at your clients. If they are, you could do the GC, you could do the in-houses, but beneath them, you don't have to just say, okay, well, I'm only putting in 5 clients this year, so I'll only put forward 5 referees. Give us as many as possible. Peer firms as well. If you're working alongside a firm doing similar work for the same clients, you're working as part of a team and you get on well, why not put them down too? That doesn't hurt either. There are a few different other things I think the Legal 500 are doing to help in that regard. I think one of them is that you can contact. There's a new tool that will allow you to contact your clients on our behalf. Basically, instead of us sending an email and maybe get caught in a spam filter, you can send the link to our client survey directly to them. I'm conscious that I keep saying we. I haven't quite got out of the habit of calling myself part of Legal 500. I will get out of that eventually. But I think that the most important thing is just to make the clients aware that you are contacting them and that the Legal 500 will be contacting them and to keep an eye out for that email. And if they don't get that email, then to let the Legal 500 know so that they can, sort that out, whether it's doing a resend or trying to figure out if there's been a spam issue or something on those lines. It's just to keep on top of it. I think the most important thing as well is to note that you may well want to be ranked in all the directories, but all the directories have slightly different methodologies. So you could, for example, be ranked already in Champions and Partners or Who's Who or IFLR, and maybe not in Legal 500. And that may well be because just the criteria for ranking as a leading individual is slightly different. It may well be that you're providing exactly the same clients' contact details as the other directories, and maybe there's a bit of referee fatigue and they don't want to answer questions to us as well as everybody else. So it's thinking a little bit about that and trying to box clever, I guess. But the biggest advice I can give is that if you really do think that your practice is top of the tree and it's comparable to those that are already ranked, get in touch with the editor and say, look, where am I going wrong? What's in the submission that isn't showing me in the best light? Is there something about the clients that they're saying that I'm missing out on? And the editor should be able to give you a pretty frank response, and explain, if there is something missing, and that will only help you for the next year's submissions.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I always used to say, in terms of the referees, don't just put the top person, not just the general counsel, but all of especially the sort of more mid and junior level people who actually are the ones handling the cases on a day-to-day basis, who've got that relationship and who probably look up to you as well if they're more junior to you and they work with you, because they're the ones who will actually take the time to feedback and to talk about their work with you. So because what I did notice was a lot of people would just put the very impressive names, as their referees. And actually it is really, as you say, about putting people who are more likely to reply and say something good about you. So there's definitely an element of that. Yes. Yeah.
And it's also not just whether they reply, it's what they say. I mean, I've seen responses from some fairly high profile individuals, but their responses are monosyllabic at best, to be honest. So they're not necessarily, we can say, yeah, we heard from your top clients, but if they're just saying, yeah, that they did everything we wanted to do, and that's kind of it, they don't give us any kind of description as to what your skills are, what your strengths, where you went beyond, that it's just a little bit mediocre. When other people are getting, much more flowing praise about, how brilliant they are. So it's about thinking, who has the time, who's likely to respond, who's working actually alongside you on a day-to-day basis that can actually talk about your skills and strengths.
Yeah. And what you mentioned about, the competing other guides asking for feedback, I was very conscious of that as well, because it's a good idea to provide a whole load of different referees so that, yes, they don't get this fatigue, because you don't want them to be feeling harassed by all of these different organizations reaching out to them, asking for feedback about you all the time. I think, we always used to make the point to be very selective and make sure that you just ask for, one or two, and that was it. But interestingly, with the big rival, obviously, for Chambers and Partners, and the private equity business that, bought them out, etc. How did that change things in terms of your view as, your ex-view as Legal 500? How did that change the market, do you think?
Well, I think there was a few eyebrows raised when that happened. It was a bit of a surprise. I can only talk about the external perception of it. I think there were a few firms and perhaps Chambers who looked at that and looked at any particular price hiking that might have happened and gone, oh, well, this isn't on, so to speak. I know there was a bit of uncertainty, and that maybe that meant that all directories were a bit more careful about where they decided to start increasing prices and what they could do. And I think it probably made the market a little more competitive on the commercial side of things. On the editorial side, I mean, there's always pressure to make sure that you can continue to compete and continue to do things that are new. I mean, the worst thing for any director, any publication really, is to get stale and produce the same thing over and over again. So as an editor, you're always conscious that you want to do something new for each new guide, but you also don't want to overload the firms with, okay, well, this year we're going to do 300 new practice areas, and we want submissions for all of them. So, we know you're already swamped with doing directory submissions, but here's 300 more for you to do. Or, we're going to introduce 20 different categories of lawyers for people to wade through as rankings. You can't really do that because, one, it gets a bit obscene, to be honest. You can't really see the wood for the trees. And there's also the resourcing issue, both obviously for firms and Chambers to complete submission, but also in turn to do the research. So you want to keep things fresh. You want to bring in new practice areas. While I was at the Legal 500, we brought in the Rising Star category for associates and for very, very junior barristers as well in my last year, because we wanted to make sure that, those people were also recognized at that early age that, that they were possibly the talents of the future. And that was feedback we had from firms as well, that they were interested in that kind of ranking. So certainly, I think that whenever there's a big change in the directory scene, you do look around and go, okay, well, what do we need to do to stay fresh and relevant? And I think all the directories have done that to a degree, that they've been alive to that.
Yeah. And so talk a bit about the 500 magazine and the origin of that and your involvement at the time.
So the magazine came from some internal discussions where we were looking to try to give some more context to the rankings themselves. Obviously, when you've got a ranking, it's often, maybe 200 words of editorial mentioning as many lawyers as actually stand out in the practice, and maybe obviously some individual rankings attached to them. But we've always said that's a starting point. When you as a user of directories, that's your start point. You're looking at who we're ranking. You then click on their profile, you go to the firm's website, you see more about those individuals and their practice areas and the kind of cases they've worked on. And that's how, your decision making when you're purchasing, legal services, that's the journey you go on. But we thought, well, if we can do something more internally, which would be produce a magazine where we talk to some of the people that we're ranking, get a sense of what their practices are, what the trends they're seeing, thought leadership about where the future of law is going, the future of marketing as well from law firms, client service, all that sort of thing. So it's a more rounded experience for the profession as a whole, but also the users who are using the guides. So that's how it all started. And at the time, I was the only editor with journalism experience in the directory side of the business. So I think I was the obvious choice to take it on and run with it. So perhaps when I said yes to it, I wasn't quite aware of doing two guides and a magazine at the same time, what that workload would be. but I soon learned. So, juggling, 3 projects at once, and it really is 3, because when you're editing the UK bar guide, the Asia research is beginning. So you're having to manage the Asia team, and then you're also having to prepare the monthly issue of the magazine. So it was a lot of work, but also it was a lot of fun, because it got me back to doing some journalism, giving the researchers some other things to do, some more perhaps dramatic, or it just got their brains ticking in a different way as to the sorts of things they were writing. So that was a lot of fun, and it was nice to get to do that sort of almost like a side gig as well, alongside the main directory work.
And what about the podcast? Because I know that you were doing some of the interviews, and what was your involvement in that?
So I'm a big podcast fan, which is why I was slightly apprehensive to say yes to this, obviously, because why would anyone really want to hear from me? But I've always enjoyed listening to something interesting while I'm doing something else, so perhaps a little bit more laborious, like perhaps editing a guide for the directory. So when it was mooted internally that we might do our own podcast, I jumped at the opportunity to do something with the bar in mind, because I think sometimes with my then bar hat on, the barristers sometimes get a bit of a poor rap. They can be kind of forgotten in the mix of big law and £4 billion law firms and all that sort of thing. They are much smaller. Some would even say more parochial. But I've got a lot of love for the bar and what it's able to do and the people involved in it. So I was very keen to make sure that we had a few episodes that concentrated on chambers, how the bar works, how marketing at the bar works, because that's a very still new addition to the chambers model. So there was a few people I got in contact with pretty early on saying that you're interested in doing this. It's something new, and thankfully, everyone I interviewed and the topics we covered were really interested in it. So it was another nice change of doing some journalism, but in a different format, and something that I'm actually quite keen to do more of, and hopefully will be doing that, in my new role in the future. Yeah,
and with regard to your work with the UK bar, I really did notice how you were very passionate about unconscious bias and gender fair wording. Because you were saying that you really noticed the words that people were using when they were describing, female barristers, and things that would be a difference in the adjectives in particular. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you noticed?
Yeah, so this all really came about because I was contacted by a commercial bar group in the UK who had noticed it. In both Legal 500 and Chambers and Partners on occasion, and there were, female practitioners were described as being, good with the papers, good with clients, user-friendly, whereas although their male counterparts were also described as this, they were more often described as being like the brains of Britain and, like a lion in the courtroom. Again, by comparison, women were compared to Rottweilers or something along those lines, and it just didn't really sit right. There was a clear imbalance in some instances, and you can't really blame the researchers for that, or even editors, because if that's the only quote we've got, what do you do? And if it's meant actually as a compliment, albeit from that particular individual's slightly skewed way of thinking, what do you do? And there's certainly an argument that all we're there to do is report on what the market says, and that's what the market says, that's what the market says. But I took the view that perhaps it's more just an issue of educating our referees and the market, and saying, look, how would you like to be described in a online directory that is going to be there for an entire year? And the first thing that somebody might see about you or know anything about you is how 8 words describe you. And I think that got a bit of traction. We put out a few blogs, and then we put some instructions out saying, please, take a think about how you want to describe, the individuals you're working with. And each year there was a slight decrease in the kinds of things we were getting. I wouldn't say that it was an overnight success. It has taken a bit of time, and we still got things. And that then it becomes a process of training the researchers to say, look, if somebody uses an adjective that's clearly biased one way or the other, then is there a synonym you can use that's a bit more gender neutral instead? You're not changing the meaning of the quote. You're just getting rid of something that's going to be offensive. Of course, on the other side of that, sometimes something that you might think offensive, the individual themselves will not find offensive. And, sometimes I've spent far too long worrying about whether a quote is going to be taken in the right way or not. And am I overthinking it? And sometimes you just have to take a punt and hope that everything's okay. And other times you just go, okay, no, we'll go something that's a bit more neutral, a bit more bland, unfortunately. And then, if the barrister or the chambers want to query why the quote isn't particularly good or particularly long this year, then you just got to have a frank conversation with them and saying, well, the alternative was this, and we weren't sure they were going to like this. If you want us to change it, we can. So yeah, it's, from my perspective, there is always going to be, or can always be, a slight imbalance when it comes to rankings and where people are described in something like a directory. So it's really important that those who are working on it recognize that and do their best to mitigate it. And that either comes in the editing process or it comes before the research even begins. That means educating the market, doing training with chambers and firms to so that they understand what the issues are.
Yeah, well, I think you really made a mark with that, John. I must thank you for that. I really noticed, this issue when you raised it at Legal 500, and I really noticed it, and I was very pleased about it because, yes, it's very unhelpful when women are characterized, negatively for doing exactly the same job and being, really, really good. And certainly within the legal industry, I wonder if you've noticed any changes. So, for example, in the Asia Pacific guide that you did you notice anything about the difference between, the male and female partners, or anything that you noticed about, the culture here or anything like that?
It's a bit difficult to give almost like a one-fits-all response to that, because obviously for the Asia Pacific guide, it's 25 different jurisdictions, and obviously each of them has their own culture. Some are relatively liberal when it comes to the male and female split, and we've seen some great strides in inequality in some jurisdictions. Others are slightly more conservative still, and that isn't necessarily just the gender split, it's also by race and by sexuality. So one of the things that I have to be very careful of, obviously, when you're being the editor of the Asia Guide, is to be aware of regional sensitivities, to not necessarily put one's own views on those things to the fore and expect things to change overnight because you believe equality in a certain way and perhaps an entire jurisdiction doesn't yet. So I do get the sense that things are moving in the right direction when it comes to equality in Asia. In some jurisdictions will take a lot longer to get there, and that's not every country can move on its with everybody else. They have to move at their own pace. And I've often wondered how international firms do it. If they're headquartered in London or Berlin or New York, and they come from a fairly liberal democratic society, and they move to another region of the world where perhaps homosexuality is outlawed, or it's a clearly very patriarchal society. How are they able to maintain their own firm culture in those jurisdictions? And I think it is difficult for firms to be able to do that without obviously upsetting their local clients. It's something that I wouldn't necessarily want to have on my plate of fixing. But we've seen in the last couple of years with things like the Me Too movement and BLM, that the issue of equality is now more and more at the forefront of every business, and that includes law firms. So I do think that they are, even the more conservative firms are thinking, okay, well, we need to be on the right side of history here in some way, and we need to make sure that we are able to, at least, from a selfish perspective, make sure we bring in the right talent and the best talent can compete for them, which means that we need to have a culture that is all inclusive. And that means that they need to promote internally, whether that means actually, moving up the in-house law firm ladder, or if it just means that the disbursement of equal work, making sure that people aren't sidelined because of who they are, and they can work on the best work internally at the firm. I see it all moving in the right direction, but it's still a process.
It definitely is, yes, a long process. But tell me about your move now to Portobello Legal Media and your first edition. So tell us about that.
Right. So yes, after 3 years at the directories, I was missing writing and journalism, and this opportunity came along, and we will be launching our first publication in the next few weeks, which is called International Employment Lawyer, which, as the name suggests, is focusing on those individuals in the market who are involved in the forefront of cross-border employment work for multinational companies who have to deal with the global workforce. So, we'll be looking at all the things that general counsel and C-suite readers, have to worry about when it comes to their workforce, whether that's privacy when employees are working from home during the pandemic, global mobility, the influence of the gig economy, platform workers, diversity and inclusion. It's a very wide remit we'll be looking at, and it's an exciting project to get involved in. And as I said, we should be launching in the next few weeks.
Right. And is that going to be hard copy or digital format, or how are people going to be able to read it?
It's digital. We will have a website. We have a website now, but it's currently hidden while we get all our content uploaded. There'll be a weekly news brief, which will go out to subscribers. All our news and features are free to view, and there'll be more products that will come out of the title in the months and years to come as we grow.
And will you be covering a lot of topics such as mental health and things like that as well? I know that you have a big interest in that area. Yes.
As I'm sure, and there's definitely a big conversation to be had, or should be continuing to have, around mental health in the legal profession. But more broadly, at the moment, I think we've all, to some level or not, suffered our own mental health and well-being during the pandemic, and all working from home, being cooped up, and everyone's experience is different. And certainly for employers, that is a big topic that they should be aware of, whether it's from a liability issue to their workers or otherwise. So we'll definitely be covering that in the months ahead. More specifically about the legal profession, it's something that I've jumped up and down and banged my soapbox about, because I've seen plenty of friends who have suffered, even before the pandemic, with the stress of working in major law firms and perhaps not having the support that they need when things get tough. And we've seen some horrible stories of what happens when people aren't given the right support. So there is definitely a big conversation that firms need to have internally, and actually I think with each other, to get some best practice advice they can share and say, look, we're all in the same boat. How can we make sure that, competition aside, making sure we get the best work and we seem to do the best for our clients, we don't want our employees, our future stars and leaders of the firm getting hurt because of the work that we're making them do and the pressure we're putting them under. So it's certainly something that needs to be shone a light on as much as possible. And some firms are very good at that, and some firms are not so good at that. And I can only hope that things that myself and my colleagues at IEL will write, and my other colleagues in legal journalism will continue to write about, and just make it clear that have those conversations internally, and think about, some of the issues that will be affecting your associates and your fellow partners.
Absolutely. And it's something that I'm obviously very heavily involved in and very mindful of. I really want to bring mindfulness and well-being to the forefront of people's minds in law firms. I think that it's a tough career in itself without the addition of stress of work from home, COVID, uncertainty, economic uncertainty, all of that on top of it. And, times are tough for people. And I hope that they will always, reach out and talk to people when they need support. So, but on that note, I'm excited to see what you produce in your new role. And thank you very much for coming today. If people want to connect with you and reach out, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. Just type in Luit-Drummond. There's only one of me around with that name, so you can't miss me. Or you can get me on Twitter. It's at JBDLD. Or look out for us at International Employment Lawyer coming very soon.
We shall definitely look out for that. And it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today, John. Thank you very much for your time. And I look forward to catching up with you again very soon.
Thanks for having me, Lara.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Legal Genie podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and give it a rating and review to help others find it. Please do subscribe so that you don't miss the next exciting episode of the Legal Genie podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a magical week ahead.